10 years ago, my only daughter walked out of my small apartment and out of my life, embarrassed by my secondhand clothes, my tiny kitchen, and my empty bank account. She said her new wealthy in-laws would give her the life she deserved, and she never looked back. I survived alone, quietly building a small business into something far bigger than anyone expected. Then one rainy afternoon, I saw a thin woman outside a bakery begging for expired cakes, two hungry children clinging to her coat. When she turned, it was my daughter. And when she saw me step out of a Rolls Royce, her face collapsed. What she told me next made my blood run cold, and what I did for her changed everything. My name is Clarissa Donnelly, and I am 68 years old. 10 years ago, she stood in the doorway of her small apartment, hands folded, trying to stay composed while her only daughter packed the last of her things. The girl wouldn't meet her eyes. She spoke about a better life, about how her fiancé's wealthy family didn't want her associating with people who lived like this. Each word landed like a stone. There were no hugs, no lingering glances, just the click of heels down the hallway and the echo of a slammed taxi door. She stood there long after the sound faded, realizing that poverty had suddenly turned her from mother into embarrassment. She didn't beg her to stay. She simply whispered a blessing into the empty room and closed the door, but that silence would follow her for years. News traveled back in fragments: elegant wedding photos online, expensive vacations, glittering celebrations surrounded by people who judged others by bank balance instead of heart. Her daughter stopped returning calls. Cards came back unanswered. Invitations never arrived. In her new world, there was no room for the woman who had once worked double shifts so she could attend school trips and dance recitals. The wealthy in-laws presented themselves as saviors, promising security and status in exchange for obedience. And slowly, her daughter rewrote the story, erasing the years of sacrifice and replacing them with shame. Watching from afar, the mother learned something painful. Wealth can build walls much faster than homes. And once those walls rise, love has to stand outside in the cold and hope, just hope, that someday a window might open. The apartment felt quieter after that. Birthdays passed without phone calls. Holidays arrived like heavy clouds. She filled her days with work, first out of necessity, then out of survival. Nights were the worst. She would sit with a cup of tea and wonder if her daughter ever thought of her, or if she had been tucked away like an old coat, forgotten in the back of a glamorous closet. Loneliness is not loud. It is slow and patient. It moves into the empty spaces left behind by unspoken apologies. Still, she didn't allow bitterness to grow. She prayed, she waited, and she held on to the hope that love, real love, eventually finds its way home. When the factory she worked at closed, most people her age gave up. But she had survived too much in life to surrender now. She started small, baking old family recipes in a borrowed kitchen and selling them at markets. People loved the warmth she poured into every loaf. Orders grew. Soon she hired help, then rented a tiny storefront. One shop became two. Then wholesale contracts came: supermarkets, cafes, hotels. What began as survival slowly turned into something steadier: opportunity. She didn't chase wealth. She chased dignity, the ability to stand on her own feet without owing anyone anything. And life, for once, met her halfway. Success didn't arrive overnight. It tiptoed in quietly through long hours, aching hands, and relentless faith. She reinvested every penny back into the business, expanding carefully, never forgetting the sting of having nothing. By the time a decade had passed, her brand was known across the region. She bought a modest home, then a nicer car, then, eventually, luxuries she had once only admired in magazines. Yet she remained humble. She still greeted every employee by name. She still delivered fresh bread to the local shelter each Sunday. And every night she whispered one prayer: that her daughter, wherever she was, had found happiness, even if that happiness no longer included her. An investment advisor, a kind man who believed in her, helped her expand further. Soon there were warehouses, delivery fleets, and international orders. Banks now called her Madam, newspapers wrote features about her rise from poverty, and partners arrived with offers she once could never imagine. That was when the Rolls-Royce came, not as a trophy, but as a symbol of how far resilience can travel. Still, one thing remained unchanged: an empty space in her heart shaped exactly like her daughter. All the success in the world could not fill it. Then one rainy afternoon, fate finally decided to speak. She stopped near a bakery to buy pastries for her staff. As she stepped out of the car, she noticed a thin woman near the back door, asking quietly for leftover, expired cakes to feed two trembling children. Something about the slope of her shoulders felt heartbreakingly familiar. When the woman turned, time seemed to stop. Eye contact, shock, recognition. And just like that, the 10-year silence shattered, not with words, but with tears gathering in eyes that once looked away. The story that would change both their lives had just begun. Rain slid down the shop windows as she watched the scene unfold. Her daughter stood beside the dumpster entrance, voice trembling as she asked the baker if they had anything expired, anything the children could eat. The staff member looked embarrassed, slipping her a small bag before disappearing inside. The humiliation on her daughter's face was unmistakable, the same girl who once refused to eat leftovers, now begging for stale cake. She stepped out of the car slowly, umbrella in hand, heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the street noise. When their eyes finally met, there was no anger, only shock and a grief so deep it almost felt like relief. After 10 years of silence, life had brought them face to face, not in mansions or ballrooms, but in an alley behind a bakery. Two little faces peered up from under a worn blanket, wide-eyed, shivering, and painfully thin. They clung to their mother's coat as though letting go might make the world disappear. She knelt down slowly, smiling gently so they wouldn't be afraid, asking their names and how old they were. They answered politely, far too polite for children who had clearly gone hungry. She reached into her car, returning with warm coats, snacks, and bottled water. They thanked her with the shy gratitude of children who had learned early that kindness is rare. Watching them, her heart broke all over again, not just for her daughter, but for the innocent lives caught in the fallout of adult pride and greed. Her daughter finally spoke, voice cracked, eyes full of shame. She apologized before anything else, the words tumbling out so fast they nearly dissolved into sobs. She admitted she had cut ties because she thought wealth equaled worth, and that she believed her in-laws when they said her mother was holding her back. Now she stood in the rain with nothing left but regret. The mother didn't scold her. She simply placed a trembling hand on her cheek and whispered, "You're home now." Years of silence melted into tears, the painful, healing kind that burns first then soothes. They sat in the car while the children warmed up. Piece by piece, the truth came out. Her husband had trusted his parents completely. They had convinced him to sign over assets for tax reasons, only to strip everything away once the paperwork cleared. They controlled the house, the bank accounts, even the children's documents. When he protested, they pushed him out of the family business and threatened legal war. Debt followed, then eviction, then scarcity. Pride kept her from reaching out until there was nothing left to lose. Listening quietly, the mother realized the people her daughter had once chosen over her had taken pleasure in destroying her. She didn't rage. She didn't panic. She asked calm, precise questions, names, dates, account numbers, contract details. Her daughter watched in disbelief as the woman she once dismissed as small and poor suddenly became composed, strategic, and formidable. Years of running a business had sharpened her into steel wrapped in silk. She knew exactly what this was: financial manipulation and coercion. And she also knew something her daughter didn't: she had the resources to fight back. Not for revenge, for justice. And for the children sitting quietly in the back seat. That evening, she brought them to a safe, warm apartment and filled the fridge. She tucked the children into bed, then sat across from her daughter at the kitchen table. There were tears, apologies, long pauses, but beneath it all was a decision forming, steady and unshakable. She would not let arrogance win. She would not let those who mocked her poverty walk away after destroying her child's life. She would protect her family, even the one who had once abandoned her. Because motherhood doesn't expire. It endures, and when necessary, it rises. The next morning, just after sunrise, she stepped onto the balcony with her phone and dialed a number reserved for rare emergencies, her legal and financial team. Her voice was soft, but her instructions were precise. Background checks, asset tracing, contract audits, quiet filings, strategic pressure. Within hours, the in-laws world, built on deception and false superiority, began to tremble. They had once laughed at the poor mother. They were about to discover exactly how wrong they had been. Her legal team moved with the precision of surgeons. Quiet inquiries were made, documents were retrieved, and every signature her daughter and son-in-law had ever placed under family trust agreements was examined. It didn't take long to uncover patterns: coercion masked as advice, power of attorney papers pushed across tables during family dinners, and contracts designed so only one side ever won. The mother didn't storm into offices or shout into phones. She simply authorized the team to proceed with full legal force. Protective filings were made to secure the children's welfare. Emergency motions froze accounts linked to suspected fraud. The in-laws had spent years believing they were untouchable. Now, quietly, the ground beneath them began to shift, not because of anger, but because a woman they once dismissed refused to let injustice stand. Within days, a web of shell accounts, offshore transfers, and property deeds surfaced, all pointing back to the in-laws. Every loan, every gift, every paper adjustment had been another step toward stripping the young couple of independence. But now every trail was documented, time-stamped, and submitted. The team even uncovered funds siphoned from the son-in-law's salary under the guise of family management fees. Her daughter listened in stunned silence, realizing that her trust had never been love, it had been leveraged. Through it all, the mother stayed composed. She didn't say, "I told you so." She simply rested a hand on her daughter's trembling fingers and said, "We will make this right." Depositions began. Lawyers asked questions the in-laws never expected to answer. Their confident smiles strained as contradictions surfaced, dates that didn't align, agreements without witnesses, transfers lacking consent, screenshots, emails, recordings. Piece by piece, a structure built on deceit began to fracture. The court grew less sympathetic with every inconsistency. They had built reputations on wealth and status, but under oath, reputation means nothing. Truth does, and truth was no longer theirs to control. Her daughter cried quietly after the session, grieving not just the money lost, but the illusion of belonging that had been sold to her. The mother held her close, finally able to protect her the way she had always wanted to. As asset freezes expanded and legal notices multiplied, panic finally set in. The in-laws called desperately, demanding meetings, accusing everyone else of betrayal. Their tone had changed completely, gone with superiority, replaced by fear. They tried to convince the daughter to fix this internally, but she no longer answered. Power once theirs had slipped through their fingers the moment accountability arrived. Meanwhile, the mother continued life calmly, taking the children to school, cooking warm meals, building a safe place made of routine and love. Justice didn't roar. It whispered steadily, relentlessly, until the guilty had nowhere left to hide. Court rulings began falling like dominoes. Misappropriated assets were ordered returned. Business control was stripped. Properties were seized pending investigation. Fines, audits, mandatory repayments. The in-laws, once so confident, now sat in courtrooms listening as judges questioned their every decision. None of this brought the mother joy. She took no pleasure in humiliation. But she felt relieved. Relief that deceit no longer wore crowns. Relief that her grandchildren would grow up watching integrity win. For the first time in years, her daughter stood taller, not because she had wealth again, but because she finally had truth. Her daughter apologized again, this time not from shame, but from clarity. She thanked her mother for stepping in when she least deserved it. The mother simply smiled, wiping away tears she had hidden for a decade. "Love doesn't keep score," she whispered. Slowly, dignity, stripped away by arrogance long ago, returned to them both. Not the dignity that comes from riches or status, but the kind that grows when truth stands firm and hearts choose humility. And that dignity was something no one could ever take again. The final step was ensuring safety for the future. Trust funds were created, legally locked, for the children's education and care. Housing was secured in her name only. Emergency protections were set so no one could ever manipulate finances again. Her daughter began working part-time, rebuilding confidence, while the mother quietly supported the rest. Not as a rescuer, not as a victim, but as a protector, steady, calm, unbreakable. Justice had done its work. Now it was time for healing. Healing began with conversations neither of them had ever wanted to face. They sat at the kitchen table late into the night, finally saying the things that had lived unspoken for years. Her daughter admitted the truth, that pride had blinded her, that she had believed money made her better than the woman who raised her. The mother listened quietly, sometimes wiping away silent tears, sometimes pausing simply to breathe. She didn't defend herself, she didn't lecture. She only told her story, the loneliness, the birthdays spent alone, the years of praying for a phone call that never came. Hard truths do not destroy real love, they refine it. And slowly, the anger dissolved, replaced by a fragile honesty that, for the first time in a decade, had room to grow. Her daughter apologized again and again, not out of guilt, but from a place of humility. She apologized for the words, the silence, the absence, the way she had chosen strangers over the one person who had always loved her without conditions. The mother didn't rush forgiveness. She allowed the words to sit, to breathe, to matter. Forgiveness, after all, isn't a door you fling open in a moment. It's a key you learn to turn slowly as trust rebuilds. And while the past could not be erased, the future, for the first time, felt writable. Trust did not return overnight. It came back in small gestures. Phone calls that were actually returned, visits that weren't canceled, feelings spoken instead of hidden. The daughter began involving her in daily life again, asking for advice, seeking comfort, showing gratitude. The mother, cautious but hopeful, responded with the same gentle steadiness she'd always had. There were setbacks, moments when old hurts resurfaced, but now instead of walking away, they talked through them. Trust wasn't a gift anymore. It was a garden watered, tended, and protected. This time love had boundaries, clear, kind, and necessary. The mother explained calmly that respect was no longer optional from anyone. No more disappearing, no more dismissing feelings. Decisions affecting the family would be made together, openly. Her daughter agreed, not out of fear, but relief. Boundaries didn't limit their bond, they strengthened it. They ensured that love would never again be mistaken for weakness. And for the first time, both women felt safe inside the relationship instead of bracing for pain. They attended counseling together, not because they were broken, but because they wanted to understand each other better. Sessions were hard at first. Tears came easily. So did silence. But slowly, they learned how past wounds had shaped their choices, how insecurity, pride, and fear had twisted love into distance. The therapist helped them build new ways to speak, new ways to listen. Her daughter learned that vulnerability is not humiliation, and the mother learned that asking for respect is not selfish, it's healthy. Each session stitched another piece of their relationship back together. From everything they'd endured, powerful lessons emerged. She learned that strength isn't loud. Sometimes it looks like patience, resilience, and the courage to stand up gently. Her daughter learned that real wealth isn't found in mansions or titles. It is found in loyalty, humility, and the arms that hold you when the world falls apart. And together, they learned that forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it transforms it into wisdom. Those lessons became the foundation of their new life. Respect finally became mutual. Her daughter no longer saw her as poor or less than. She saw her as what she had always been, a woman of extraordinary strength, grace, and quiet power. The children adored their grandmother, not for what she owned, but for how safe they felt with her. And every time her daughter looked at her now, there was gratitude in her eyes, real, deep, unwavering. The mother didn't need thanks. She didn't need praise. The respect itself was enough. Because after years of distance, they had finally arrived at the place where love and dignity could live together, side by side. She thought life had finally gone quiet, but a new chapter was already waiting for her. Stay with me. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe so you can see how everything changes next. Slowly, stability began to weave itself back into their days. Bills were paid on time. The children slept peacefully in warm beds instead of borrowed couches. Meals were shared around a small kitchen table, where laughter started returning in shy little bursts. She didn't flaunt her resources. She used them carefully, making sure every decision built long-term security instead of temporary comfort. Her daughter found part-time work she genuinely enjoyed, climbing back toward independence one careful step at a time. The fear that had once wrapped itself around their lives loosened its grip, replaced by calm routines and predictable days. Stability didn't look glamorous. It looked safe, and safe felt priceless. Their new home wasn't enormous, but it was wrapped in warmth. Soft curtains, fresh paint, a small garden where the children planted flowers and proudly checked their progress each morning. The locks worked, the roof didn't leak. The neighbors waved instead of judging. She made sure the paperwork was ironclad, no hidden clauses, no control from outside hands. Everything belonged to her and eventually would protect the grandchildren. At night, the house filled with bedtime stories and whispered prayers instead of arguments and fear. Safety, she realized, wasn't walls and doors. It was the feeling of finally being able to breathe without wondering what could be taken away tomorrow. Even though the marriage had fractured under the weight of betrayal, her daughter and son-in-law learned to co-parent with respect. Boundaries were firm, conversations civil, and the children remained the center of every decision. She guided them gently, reminding them that children don't need perfect parents, they need calm ones. There were mistakes, awkward moments, even tears. But there was also growth. They learned to show up on time, speak kindly, and never weaponize affection. And watching this unfolding maturity, she felt something unexpected rise inside her. Pride, not in wealth, not in victory, but in the way love had found a quieter, healthier way forward. Gratitude began appearing in the smallest moments. A simple thank you, a soft hug in the hallway, a cup of tea placed beside her without words. Her daughter didn't take anything for granted anymore. Every meal, every warm bed, every second chance felt like a blessing she refused to overlook. The children, too, learned gratitude early. They said grace before eating. They hugged tighter, they spoke gently. And she thanked life for the strange, winding road that had broken her heart only to rebuild it stronger. Gratitude didn't erase the past, but it made the present glow. She finally understood what true wealth meant. It wasn't the cars, the numbers in the bank, the polished titles people chased. True wealth was hearing the children laugh from the next room. It was knowing her daughter could finally sleep through the night without fear. It was the peace that came from independence, from never needing permission to feel safe again. Wealth was dignity, freedom, the ability to give without being controlled. She had once been poor in money, now she realized how rich she had always been in heart. And now, blessed with both, she used that abundance to build, not boast. Peace didn't arrive with fanfare. It slipped in gently, like evening sunlight across the living room floor. Days passed without anxiety. Nights carried soft dreams instead of dread. She spent mornings walking with the children, afternoons managing business decisions with quiet confidence, and evenings sharing stories about resilience and kindness. She no longer lived in the shadow of abandonment or betrayal. Instead, she lived in the light of choices made with courage. Peace wasn't the absence of memories, it was the presence of acceptance. And finally, her heart could rest. One night, as the children slept and the house settled into silence, her daughter rested her head on her shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." Tears came, soft, grateful, healing. A mother's heart, she realized, doesn't stop loving when it is broken. It learns to love wiser, stronger, with boundaries that protect instead of walls that punish. She had lost her child once to pride and found her again through grace. And as she looked around at the life they had rebuilt together, she knew one eternal truth. Real love isn't proven when everything is easy. It is proven when you choose each other, even after the world falls apart.